'Twas the night before Christmas, but it could have been any night before his dream would come true. Like most nights before Christmas or any night before the next day, the house was quiet and still, since no touchdown was scored, no layup made, no base stolen, and
Door
no
of
puck
Scrooge's
hit the
counting
back of
house.
the net. Yet the boy, sound asleep, wanted to be where he thought it mattered most, in New York City, where Santa might deliver his dream. And Santa, also known as John Pruder, program director of WFAN Radio in New York City, gave this man-boy the opportunity. And then New York sports fans gave him a chance, gave him a breath, gave him a life, gave him a career. After so many failings and successes too, in the most faraway places like San Francisco and Sacramento, Atlanta and Hollywood, all minor league locations to this man-boy, all appetizers and starters in the menu that included the biggest apple, the main event that you can feel by reading Me Here, You There, my 3 decades and then some at WFAN Radio in New York City. Broadway, really, to the man-boy. The book available at Amazon and bookstores like Barnes & Noble and the very unique bookstore, the P&T Knitwear store on Orchard Street on the Lower East Side. The poet she was, Maya Angelou, may have best described the more than 30 years I was able to spend at WFAN. People may forget your name. People may forget what you said. But people will never forget how you made them feel. For the WFAN listeners and callers, they felt connected to this son of a grocer, and this man-boy felt the connection in return. And so in my book, Me Here, You There, those there, the callers and listeners, are so chronicled, so noted for the special people they were and are, the New York sports fans, loaded with passion and energy, knowledge and experience, compassion, empathy, humanity, and humility. Iconic and ironic, sardonic, and yes, sometimes demonic, with both humor and sarcasm, as I've often said in my podcast. So it's with the listeners and callers that we note that made the years at WFAN memorable, and those who took the time to listen and call, those who gave support and encouragement to the man-boy who finally got to New York and now was attempting to make it in New York. Oh, sure, there were some of the rich and famous from Seinfeld and Tony Roberts and Bruno Kirby and Andrew Dice Clay, Joan Rivers, but those who made the night move were the butchers, the bakers, and the candlestick makers, students and truck drivers, cops and firefighters, teachers, bartenders from all neighborhoods in the tri-state area and beyond, young and old alike as well, who made overnight under the covers prime time. So let me acknowledge those in my book, Me Here, You There, those who filled the dark with light. So bright it was. The notable stars that became, over the 34 years, taking their calls, taking the heart and soul of the New York sports fan on the most listened to sports radio station anywhere. And I can start from the book, Me Here, You There, once again, reminding you of a partial title to the book because it's all told, Me Here, You There, My 3 Decades, Overnight, Under the Covers, Schmoozing, SPORTS, as Captain Midnight for WFAN in New York City. When we come back, we continue from Me Here and You There, talking about those who were there, the listeners and the callers, the real co-stars of Overnight Under the Covers. After this.
Ho, 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 and happy holidays from your friends on The Fan, 101.9 FM and always live on the free Odyssey app.
We are back with the inside of Me Here and You There, meaning we are doing some reading from the book that we have out, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and some other bookstores as well, in and around the tri-state area. And we are continuing with this segment with the unsung stars of the program. They were the regular callers who became, in essence, my co-stars. They comprised a list of characters, and boy, were they characters. And they rivaled any from a top TV sitcom, make no mistake. We never had a special line for the regulars. They called in, they took their chances on getting on the air, just like everyone else. One of the best aspects about being on Overnight was that I could give them more time, sometimes much more time, than the standard quick 90 seconds or so that callers got during the day. Some of these callers I met. Some I became close friends with. 3 of them became outsized figures in the New York sports world. What they all had in common, these 3 special callers, they cared more about their teams than life itself. Number 1 on the unsung stars of the program, and we start with her on page 173, Doris from Rego Park, our most mysterious and beloved caller. Her full name, which we never used, was Doris Bauer. She was a victim of neurofibromatosis, the same disease that affected the famed Elephant Man. But she may have suffered just as much from the mercurial play of her beloved New York Metropolitans. Her trademark was a cough that made her immediately recognizable even on the 7 train traveling to Shea Stadium. When she died in November of 2003 at age 58, a number of listeners attended the memorial service wearing Metropolitan jerseys. The New York Times, they published first an obituary, then a full page in the Time magazine's year-end The Lives They Lived, written by Nicholas Davidoff, the author of the acclaimed biography of Moe Berg, The Catcher Was a Spy. The obituary said Ms. Bauer would set her alarm clock for 1 a.m. every day and call into the Fan. She read 5 newspapers a day and clipped and saved countless articles about baseball. She also scribbled baseball notes into thousands of legal pads, storing them in closets, cabinets, and cases. The article also noted she never drove a car, never dated, never married, but rather formed crushes on two Metropolitan players. First, it was Ed Kranepool, and later, Lenny Dykstra. And it had this quote from Doris's brother Harold. Doris lived to talk on the Fan. She loved it more than anything else in life because it gave her a reason to stay alive. So that concludes page 173, but it doesn't end the story of Doris from Rego Park. That continues on page 175. And this is somewhat notable, and this also says something about what I'm going to read to you, is that she had an amazing impact on the program with a number of listeners. Because in 2011, a writer from the West Village named Don Rossler even composed a song about her called Doris from Rego Park. You can listen to it on YouTube, and some of the lyrics are, well, all I know is I stay up till I hear Doris from Rego Park, calls by day and calls by dark. Each call concludes when she says, thank you for your time and your courtesy. Now I wonder if she'll drift off in sleep with her radio on like mine. As fabled New York City radio host Jonathan Schwartz, who first played the song on his show, he told the New York Times in an email, what it comes down to is alone, being aloneness, the city at night. Doris calls, you hear, you listen, it's snowing, alone. A second most notable listener and caller, and to this day is remembered with a smile on the face that goes from ear to ear. We are talking about the one and only Jerome from Manhattan, and his full name, Jerome Middleman. He turned rooting for his favorites into performance art. Whenever he called, we introduced him with a bit that we had mocked up, a takeoff on the introduction to The Twilight Zone. It became the Jerome Zone. Picture a man sitting alone in his room, no family, no friends, just a phone and the sports section. A man obsessively, as I turn to page 176, a man obsessively pondering the fate of the Yankees, the Jets, and the Knicks. His is a dimension of sight, of sound, but no mind. There's a rubber room up ahead. You are entering the Jerome Zone. All in good fun, we hope. And he took it in stride. He was flattered by the Twilight Zone type introduction to his telephone calls. And know this, and you do know this if you remember Jerome from Manhattan, no matter how well the Bronx Bombers were doing, Jerome found something to kvetch about. The Yankees could be having the post-World Series championship parade in Manhattan's Canyon of Heroes, and he would find fault. Maybe the wrong guy was in the lead float. But his hallmark was his performance, how loud he was, how mile a minute he was, how emotional and frantic he was, with me, of course, gently prompting him. Jerome would get so mad. Was it real? Was it an act? Nobody cared. Some of his rants have been preserved on YouTube. Some typical themes. They're going to have to do something, Steve. And what is the possibility of the Yankees getting, insert a name, of star opponent player without giving up any good talent? After rattling off a bunch of proposed swaps, Jerome would say, if they don't do those things, then insert the name of a New York general manager, he should be fired. One time, Yankees GM Brian Cashman was listening, and after making a deal said, Jerome, this one's for you. Once Jerome had built up a head of steam, there was no stopping him at all, no interrupting him at all. He would then rev himself up, and build up, and then, just like that, it would end. It was supremely entertaining, and at the same time, supremely frightening. Jerome from Manhattan. So, we have read a little bit from the book, Me Here, You There, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other bookstores. Now we go to Short Al from Brooklyn. Now we have talked of Doris from Rego Park, and we have touched on Jerome from Manhattan. And any regular listener to Overnight, Under the Covers, Me Here and You There, certainly remember Doris, certainly remember Jerome. And maybe if we go back a ways towards the beginning of WFAN radio in New York City, and all of it, as you know, began in July of 1987, you might remember Short Al from Brooklyn. Now, Short Al from Brooklyn, a reassuring voice at the top of many shows, was that of Short Al. A Brooklyn Dodgers rooter in his youth, and a vendor he was at Ebbets Field. Short Al, who was born Albert Kaufman, became a passionate Metropolitan fan. And what distinguished the 5'4" former amateur boxer, though, was his reliability as a caller, aided by his speed dial. 7 days a week, he told the New York Times. His day job was as a letter carrier. So there was total panic in 2008 when Al stopped phoning in. Where, we all wondered, was Short Al? Was he even still living? The following year, Times reporter Corey Kilgannon tracked him down eating breakfast at a Brooklyn diner. It turned out that Al had suffered a fall and moved in with his daughter in Bensonhurst. Because she had to get up early for work, he had stopped calling the overnight show. But he was still Short Al. Immediately he went into a Fandroid-worthy rant, reported Kilgannon, complaining about the Metropolitans' defeat the previous night. How could a manager leave a pitcher in that long? Short Al from Brooklyn, New York, the former vendor at Ebbets Field, and somebody, a great family man, a great caller to WFAN, and a wonderful human being. And we broke bread a couple of times. Short Al from Brooklyn passed away a couple of years ago, but for any long-time listener of WFAN in New York City, you would remember Short Al from Brooklyn. There was Dominic from the Hunts Point Market, and he, too, like the others, owns a piece of my heart. Now, Dominic from the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx, a huge Yankees fan. No surprise that given he is based in the Bronx. When he heard that I was the son of a humble grocer, he had fruits and vegetables from his market delivered to the fan studios in Astoria. And of course, Astoria was WFAN's home for the first 22 years of its existence before moving to 345 Hudson Street in Lower West Side of Manhattan. two people that were callers in the very beginning of WFAN. One, Frank Petrosino, and the other, Anthony Cinque. And if you're staying with me, we are on page 178. Frank Petrosino was a corrections officer, and he invited me to sit with him and his friend Anthony Cinque to attend Rangers games with the fabled Blue Cedars at Madison Square Garden. They asked me to sit with them at the Garden because I was giving the Rangers attention, even though nobody else at the station was. Now let me ad-lib here. Howie Rose took only calls from two fans of two teams. One, the New York Mets, and one, the New York Rangers. So, but late at night, and certainly after all the other shows had been on, I was talking Rangers and Icelanders, of course. And it was a bit, but it had to do with really igniting and talking about an unsung rivalry in New York City between two hockey teams, the fabled, historic, and traditional New York Rangers, and then, of course, the New York Icelanders. And that insulted, that annoyed, that bothered, that totally upset Islander fans, because I never called them Islanders. They were the Icelanders. But here we are on page 178 and going to the Garden with Frank Petrosino and Anthony Cinque. And both, let me add, as another ad-lib, two die-hard Ranger fans who knew as much about hockey as any executive that you could think of. They were so into hockey, the sport, and certainly the New York Rangers, and had a full sense of how historic they were as a franchise and original 16. They, of course, lived and died, and still do, with the New York Rangers, even though both, may I add, are married with children, so obviously they are spending most of their money on family issues and family concerns, and don't see the New York Rangers as often as they did when they were single. But Anthony and Frank, they remain friends to this day, another two who own a piece of my heart. Anthony was the most passionate and the most knowledgeable fan I met, so much so that I've always believed that the club should have hired him in some capacity. I went to both of their weddings, and fortunately, the brides were comfortable with me. So now we have talked to Frank Petrosino and Anthony Cinque and Dominic from the Hunts Point Market in the Bronx. Although the Hunts Point Market is no longer in the Bronx, but I certainly hope that Dominic is still with us. It has been years since he delivered to the Kaufman Astoria Studios in Astoria all the vegetables to the son of a grocer. Let's continue with some of those unsung stars of my overnight under the covers, me here, you there program. On page 179, Stephanie from Manhattan. She never called, but she came to the Kaufman Astoria Studios in person with a scrapbook that if she were to sell it to a former New York baseball Giants fan, she would probably make, if he was a collector, of course, probably make thousands of dollars. Stephanie from Manhattan, a fan of the old New York baseball Giants, who, of course, moved to San Francisco after the 1957 season. Stephanie could not let go. She had a hard time. It broke her heart when they left Manhattan, when they left the Polo Grounds, when they left memories of the World Series from 1951 and 1954. And Stephanie will never forget October 3rd, 1951, when Bobby Thomson hit his shot heard around the world to give the Giants the National League pennant over the Brooklyn Dodgers, when the Giants, by the way, were 13 and a half games in back of Brooklyn in late August. Caught them on the final day of the regular season. There was a 3-game playoff, and of course, in Game 3, Bobby Thomson, bottom of the 9th inning, the home run that won the National League pennant for the New York Baseball Giants. And Stephanie from Manhattan, it was hard, it was difficult, but she is trying to move forward with a heart that was broken when the Giants left New York in 1957. Still on page 179, another young woman, also, of course, it goes without saying, having a huge piece of my heart, Miriam from Valley Stream. Miriam, who I am proud to consider is a friend. She is blind, but she has the best vision of all of us. The most die-hard of Icelander fans. She knows her blue lines and high stickings as well as any NHL official. And she is enshrined in our Call of Fame. Also, still on page 179, Bruce from Bayside, another simpatico Metropolitans fan. Always a delight to talk to, not only about New York sports, but also about life itself. And still on page 179, and anybody who attended New York Ranger games at the Garden would never forget the sight of Bob Comas. Now, not too many Ranger fans knew his name, but they knew and called him the Chief. And that was because of what he wore during Ranger games. And yes, he had a Ranger jersey on at all times, but he wore an Indian headdress. And he achieved notoriety by parading through the aisles, leading cheers. He would be spelling out RANGERS with his body language. He was acknowledged by Sports Illustrated as an unofficial team mascot. Bob and I became friends, and being on the air meant everything to him. I even let him do top-of-the-hour updates, and once in a while, we would set up highlights for him to introduce. Bob Comas was a wonderful individual, a wonderful person, and yes, a character from the word go. Eventually, Bob Comas, the Chief, would move to Florida, where his mother was not in the best of health, and he decided to leave New York and leave the Rangers, not necessarily hockey, but he left New York, went to Florida to be with his mother and help her with her health problems when he himself passed away with a heart attack. A sad ending for Bob Comas, a good heart, a good soul, and somebody I will never, ever forget. And no Ranger fan would ever forget him either. Known as the Chief and very much a part of New York Ranger history, but Madison Square Garden history, and one of the first human mascots that any team anywhere has ever had. Now, continuing with some of our shooting stars in the New York Galaxy, those unsung heroes, those unsung callers and listeners who made the program as much of what it really was over 34 years. There was a connection with me and with them, and it's a connection that fills me with a great deal of pride looking back on all the 34 years of me here and you there overnight under the covers. And reading on page 180, I'm reading about Sal Soletto. Sal, like most of us in New York, Sal is over the top. And whether it's praise or whether it's criticism, we all go to the extreme in talking one or the other or both. Sal is never called to be on the air. He is a listener only. And we do keep up to this very day a warm and regular email relationship. And he sends me cards on birthdays and holidays. And when I appeared with Sid Rosenberg on WABC radio following Willie Mays' death in June of 2024, Sal wrote me this. One word describes your appearance this morning with Sid on WABC. Spectacular. All of your first-hand recollections of Willie Mays really provided so much insight, and I learned a lot of things about him from listening to you this morning. You are so right. He was the definition of a five-tool player. I found it very interesting that Joe DiMaggio had a 66-game hitting streak in the minors. And as you pointed out, I never knew how much Willie didn't want to leave New York. Indeed, if he didn't go into military service and played in the smaller ballparks of today, he would have finished with a ton of more home runs. You provided, without a doubt, the best tribute to him, especially your at the game when he played comments. As always, all of your work is brilliant, and certainly your part-timer work at WFAN should read full-time. Again, take care, and I am looking forward to your next shift on the Fan. Stay cool. Sincerely, Sal. And Sal, yes, he's over the top, and it's a good thing that because you can only hear me instead of seeing me as well right now, you don't see any blushing that comes from Sal going over the top, talking about the kind of fan that he was and still is from what we were doing on the radio. And all of this, what we were doing on the radio, could not be done without those listening and those calling. Because that's why we say, me here and you there. If you weren't there, I wasn't going to be here. Now, again, that was just a little sampling of some of the unsung heroes and unsung stars in the galaxy of late-night radio. And again, these people gave me a chance, gave me a breath, gave me the opportunity, gave me the chance to continue schmoozing, S-P-O-R-T-S, for the 34 years at the greatest radio station in the greatest city in the world, New York City. So, again, we'll take a little bit of a break and then a little bit more reading from a book that right now I'm hearing is getting itself off to a good start. A book that is available by ordering at Amazon, a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and a very unique bookstore the Knitwear bookstore on Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And recently, we also were at a Barnes & Noble in Staten Island. We were at Finnerty's not too long ago with the New York Baseball Giants Preservation Society. And we were at Donovan's Pub in Woodside, Queens. All wonderful places, meeting brand new people, and somewhat surreal because we've never been through this before, being an author and trying to promote a book that I think would make not only a good holiday gift for the New York sports fan, but also for any time of the year, maybe a fun read for those who like some interesting stories to tell and to read about. And the bottom line is, I want to also acknowledge my better half with all of this going on, and that's Paul Rosenberg. Paul, of course, wanted to get involved with the podcast that we do. It was basically his idea, and Paul Rosenberg at WFAN Radio in New York City does so many things, and he is excellent at all of them. He was producer on my program. He's been a producer on other programs. He is, as I have said before, with my tongue-in-cheek introductions of Paul, that he is the producer and director and choreographer and makeup man and key drip. He's not a drip at all. Key grip would be better said and more to the point. But he has done just about everything you can imagine on both sides of the radio middle partition. On the other side of the glass he is right now, and on this side of the glass, in front of the microphone, and maybe you have heard him host a show, he is absolutely excellent. And I mean that from the bottom of the proverbial heart. He is informed, he does his homework, he cares seriously about who he is and what he does. And that comes through on the radio. So, again, I can't thank Paul Rosenberg enough for all his aid, all his assistance, all his help. And the bottom line is, you will become a fan of his when you get the chance, if you haven't already, when you get the chance to hear him on the radio. We'll take a little bit of a break on this Christmas Eve and get back to you after this. We are back, and we're going to talk now from page 263. It has to do with retirement. And in my case, how do you really retire from talking and or schmoozing? You don't unless you die, or by remaining silent on a golf course. And let me add, this is not necessarily right from the book, but the golf course, I don't understand why they whisper, so the golfer can maintain his composure and his focus and concentration, where with every other recreation regarding golf, and I call it more a recreation than a sport, you can have 70,000 people at a stadium, 20,000 at an arena, and they're yelling and they are screaming and they are cheering and they are booing and they are, whatever they're doing, very loud doing it. However, with the golf, if you cough, if a plane is passing overhead, I'm telling you, all of a sudden, a golfer, and I can't pronounce the L with golf, it's G-O-F-F to me. The bottom line is the golfer cannot continue to putt or to hit his 7-iron down the fairway, or his driver. I'm just saying already. And of course, get the golf cart to take me 200 yards down the fairway. And another thing about golf announcers, they use the term fescue. This I don't understand. Can't you say tall grass? Can't you say weeds? But no, it's fescue, which I guess really is communicating to those gardeners listening to the broadcast. But I'm very lucky, as I will now continue to read from page 263. This is the last chapter, really, because it has to do with retirement. And as I said before, I'm now a part-timer, and still, I'm going to repeat this, I would pay them for the time they give me to meet and greet over the air as they have done. Those who spent a good 34 years with me during late night and midday hours, I have to say thank you so much. Callers and listeners who gave me the chance, the opportunity to fulfill the dream I had since kidhood, to work in the greatest city in the world and to be at the very first and best sports talk radio station anywhere. Broadway, the Met, Carnegie Hall, Times Square, all that is New York City. And who doesn't know from Radio City, Rockefeller Center, St. Patrick's Cathedral, Fifth Avenue, Madison Avenue, and so many other notable and historic places. A city so nice already, it's named twice. New York City, like a small country with the best and the worst of everybody and everything. And I have often said, if you can't find it here, you don't need it. The whole world in the 5 boroughs, the true definition of diversity. And here, as I have said many times before, here's my thinking on diversity. No matter where you live, if you can't accept or tolerate or, God forbid, can't embrace diversity, you got to move to another planet. There is so much to absorb with those different from yourself. And what? You have something against apples coming from another tree? It's all about character and heart and peace with your brothers and sisters. Of course, in any big city, anywhere for that matter, you got to find those who may not think like you do. You're going to find them. They're right around you, and maybe even in your same household. And some who don't have the good fortune you may have. There are so many different kinds of people in so many different kinds of situations. But you can learn and listen and help if possible. And even though this isn't possible with everybody, it really is the best way to get along and survive. And this is something I've learned over the years. Retirement. I still read the newspapers. I still subscribe to other news sources online and delete more emails than you can count as I continue reading on page 265. And there are emails from God knows where. Fertilizer I don't need. And whatever it may be, I've discovered that even if you unsubscribe, the emails still come, and they come fast and furious. We've done some traveling, twice to Europe, me and the hawker from Hackensack, Robin, my better half, and we went once on a cruise, once flying to Paris, the City of Lights. And I can tell you this, as I write on page 265, I can tell you this, you don't want to go to Paris in December, because it rains and rains and rains some more. But still, around Christmas time, the City of Lights, it is really something to see. All the color of the season, and quite nice looking, may I say. And I can tell you this, the French fries, or frites, are much better here in New York City than France. And if you didn't know any better, the river, the Seine River, doesn't look much different than the Jersey Shore. And we know what they had to do to clean that river for the Olympics. I mentioned taking a cruise. We flew to Barcelona, then we traveled through France and on to Italy. And the pizza there, well, not like New York, since you can't get a slice. So when the pie comes, it's not even cut into pieces or slices that you can pick up. You have to use a knife and a fork to eat what is too thick, with no charred crust. You would think you would find thin somewhere. Not really. And we tried a few pizza joints in Paris. Very disappointing. And I'm talking Naples, where pizza was supposedly invented. You want thin with charred crust? You go to Little Italy, or Bleecker Street, or Brooklyn for that matter. Any of the boroughs for the kind of pizza that is New York. And some of you might remember Totone's on Neptune Avenue in Coney Island. Coal-fired, wood burning, that is the way to go. And so what else? So with no monologues to write on a daily basis, with no deadlines, no anxiety, no pressure that really comes from within, so how else do I spend retirement? Well, simple answer. You can jot down and remember how lucky you were for so long to have the kind of career lasting as long as you can, with so many providing support and encouragement that ends with a book. And this book, Memoirs, a book thanking so many until the next chapter makes its way to another empty page. When you are young, with no experience, with what you want to do, it's not so easy getting that first job. But timing and good luck have to play a part, as they do in life itself. Being young with your dreams and that willingness to pay them for that first job, that'll certainly help get your career started, as it did mine. I remember getting started in both radio and TV that way, by being that giving of myself, and I would have paid anybody and everybody for that first opportunity. If you're a young person wanting to get into broadcasting, and you're going to hear no's, you're going to hear rejection, but eventually your number will be called, and that first opportunity will happen. And this not only applies to broadcasting, but just about any business you may want to go into. So let me conclude, and again, I can't thank WFAN radio here in New York City, the greatest city with the greatest sports talk radio station anywhere, and any long-time, even short-time listener to this radio station will have to acknowledge that it is the best, especially if you have gotten around the country and heard other sports talk radio stations. There is nothing as unique, as entertaining, as informative as WFAN radio in New York City. So I have to thank, of course, Chris and Ryan and Dave and those decision makers that made this holiday season the most special of all holiday seasons. I want to thank Paulie Rosenberg on the other side of the glass for not only the podcast we do, but also for his aid and assistance in anything and everything that I have done with promotion of this book. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for being there. And thank you with all that you have given me over the years. With me here, thanks for you being there. And let me finish by wishing all of you a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year.
Sports Radio 101.